Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Larpshire. I'm Ben.
And I'm Abby.
And today's video is our first video in our series on how to start and run a LARP.
This video is going to be about the initial considerations that you will have if you are trying to begin your own LARP, and our future videos in this series will go more in depth in each of these topics.
Hope you guys stick around and hope you enjoy it. Alright, so one of the first things you need to figure out before starting your LARP is what type of resources are at your disposal. One of the first things that comes to mind in regards to resources is people. Who do you have around you that can help you with this project, and what skills and abilities can they offer? Running a LARP is really not an individual project, and if you're trying to do it all by yourself, you'll probably get burnt out really fast, and you don't want that. So trying to find some people around you that can help support you and help carry out your vision for what you want the game to look like is going to be really helpful in the long run. So another big resource you need for a game is a location. Now, you may already have a location, and if you do, that is awesome. That's a huge step out of the way. Now, if you don't, then what you want to do is start off with a list of the different criteria that you are looking for in the location. Do you want there to be trees and rolling hills? Do you want an open field? Do you want structures on the property? And then from there, there's a lot of different options, whether that's renting or buying, or maybe a public park you have access to or something like that. But once you figure all that out, and you can start narrowing down your list of locations, and then once you've settled on something, you'll have a place to host your event. So another thing you'll need to consider are what types of props that you'll need for your game. Whether that's costumes or weapons for NPCs, or maybe tables, chairs, tents, things like that, or perhaps coins for in-game currency. Some of these things that you will be able to build up over time, but maybe some of those things you want to have at the beginning of your game. So making a list of those and figuring out what you already have versus what you need to purchase will help you as you start the process. So another thing you need to consider is what forms of communication you're going to use to disseminate information about your game. So whether that's contacting your helpers and those assisting you with the event, or the players, or even if you need to advertise to get people to join your game. Whether you decide to use a website or Discord or GroupMe or a text chain, email, whatever you decide on, look into what options are best for the people you're working with and what ways will communicate most efficiently the information you're trying to get across. So as an example, if you have a rule book that you want players to read and you want that to be mandatory, you want that to be in a place that's accessible, where you don't have to scroll through a bunch of messages to go find it. You want it to be posted somewhere that people can access it. So maybe a Facebook group or a website or things like that. If you are sending out updates on what time your game starts, or last minute packing lists or things like that, that may be good to be sent out in emails or as texts. So those are things you need to consider when you start the process, because nailing down communication is really going to help you and help things go much more smoothly as you start your game.
Now, something else you'll want to consider as you are planning your new LARP is figuring out what kind of a game you want to create. Now, something that has a big role to play in what kind of a game you're making is the genre. So the genre has to do with what kind of a world your game is set in, what kind of themes are there playing in that world, and what kind of people populate that world. So a lot of people think of medieval fantasy when they first imagine a LARP, but that's not the only LARP that exists. There are also vampire LARPs, there are pirate LARPs, there are steampunk LARPs, and all of these different genres come with different elements within them. So if you're planning a vampire LARP, that may involve things like intrigue. That will probably involve a lot of role play. If you're doing medieval fantasy, that's something that can involve a lot of interaction that is physical, maybe a lot of combat and things like that. And as you are making decisions about what kind of genre you want your game to be, what you're actually doing is making decisions about what kind of themes are going to take precedence when you have to make decisions about your game. So if you are trying to make a decision about what kind of a plot you're going to have at a specific event, or what kind of things are going to happen at a particular weekend that you are doing, you are going to be considering things like theme, and that goes into genre. So if you decide on the specific themes you want, maybe you want a politically driven game, maybe you want a combat driven game, knowing what themes you're looking for will help you to make decisions when push comes to shove. Something else that will have a big impact on the genre and type of game that you are going to have is your demographic. Now, your demographic is the group of people that you are hoping to attract to the game that you're making. This can be determined by things like age, it can be geography, or things like that. So what kind of people are you hoping to attract to your game? And the way that you build your game can impact the people that are attracted to that game. If, for example, you are hoping to have a game that will be very welcoming to teenagers or even children, then you are going to make decisions about what's going to go into that game to attract those people. So if you want kids or young people at that game, you may have to do things like limit certain themes in your game. There might have to be less language, or less violence, or things that are less heavy-handed so that it's still accessible to kids. If you want a more adult game, then you are welcome to have heavier themes and things like that. If you want your players to be people who are super athletic and super physical, you're going to want to create a game that is very combat heavy. So the decisions you make about your game will impact the demographic that you are trying to attract. So if you have a plan about what kind of people you are hoping to attract to this game, you will make decisions accordingly about what kind of game it's going to be. And while we will have a video going more in depth on this subject later on, it's also important to consider what your rule book is going to be at this point when you're planning out your LARP. So what kind of rules are you going to set in stone for your players to know before they approach this game? And the rules that you use might differ based, again, on what kind of a game this is. If you're looking at a steampunk parlor LARP, you may not need to go super in-depth in combat mechanics, in rules about what you're doing in a physical altercation. You may have to have other rules about interpersonal interactions or things like that. Alternatively, in a combat-heavy game, you're going to have to be making decisions about what things are allowed in these physical interactions that are occurring. So as you're building your rule book, you have to be very intentional about which rules you're putting in stone, which ones you're writing down, which ones you're sharing with your players, in order to ensure that the world and the game that you're creating match the kind of LARP that you are trying to run.
Alright, so the last thing we want to talk about in this video may not be a topic that you initially think of as you're planning your event, but it is important and will help you down the road. So we want to figure out what your level of commitment is to this project. How many hours a week or a month will you be able to dedicate to working on your LARP? How often are you going to have events? Is this going to be monthly or yearly? Do you plan on that changing in the future, or do you want it to be consistent? Also think about your helpers. It's awesome to have other people supporting you, but it's great to know what their level of commitment is as well, and how much time they have to be able to offer to the project. Maybe they don't have as much time to work on it as you, and so it may be helpful to have more people be able to spread the work out. Another thing you want to think about is down the road, how do you want to grow as a LARP? Do you want to grow in size and have more people attend? Do you have a max number of people that you're looking at? Do you want to have more LARPs per year? All those things are maybe not things that you think about in this stage of the process, but they are great things to think about because it'll help you down the road if you have a plan. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully it got your wheels turning on some of those initial steps in the process of getting your LARP off the ground. Remember, this is the first episode in this series, so we have a lot more planned for the future. And we also want to hear from you guys, so feel free to comment on our videos or reach out to us via social media on what topics about running a LARP that you want to hear more about.
Local LARPs are the backbone of the hobby, so we want to help local LARPers and local LARP administrators as much as we can. If you'd like to see more of this content, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to us here on YouTube. Go and follow us over on Instagram. And if you join our Patreon, you will get exclusive access to our Discord, where we discuss LARP ideas, future video ideas, and things related to LARP administration.
Yep. Alright guys, we will see you in the next video. Adventure awaits.